Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Kingdom Economy Coach Club here on Clubhouse. And if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, welcome. Today we are in Genesis chapter 16 as we are at the intersection of faith and financial independence, going through the Bible chapter by chapter, just trying to understand the context of the content and exactly what God has in store for us. Today, we are going to just jump right in and make things go forward. So if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you go ahead and give us a like where you're at. If you get a chance, jump over to the YouTube page and make sure you subscribe over there so that we can get that channel up over 100 people and understand exactly how the branding works and get all those pieces moving forward. So if you're willing to help us out there, I sure would appreciate it. With that said, back into the Clubhouse room here. And if you're on one of the other channels watching and you'd like to join live in the Clubhouse room, we do this Monday through Friday at 3 o'clock, and you are welcome to join us and engage in the process. So if you want to do that and don't have an invitation, feel free to reach out to me either in the comments here, or you can DM myself or somebody here at the Middle Class Millionaire, and we would be glad to get you an invitation directly in to bypass the wait list. And Clubhouse now currently is available for both iPhone and Android. And so if that is you and you want to engage in this process, you're welcome to. Today, we are going to just jump right in to Genesis chapter 16. And for those that are new to the area, we just go chapter by chapter through the Bible. And if you would like to engage, you're welcome to. I didn't put the little record button up top here on the title here in Clubhouse, but we are recording today. So hopefully that doesn't create any problems. Anyway, Genesis chapter 16. Would anybody like to help me read, or do you want me just to go ahead and jump in here and read?
Joe, I'll read if that's what you just asked.
Yes, ma'am. Genesis chapter 16. Why don't you read? Pull up my go off the top of my head because for some reason, there it is. Genesis chapter 16. Looks like there are 16 verses here. Why don't you read 1 through 10, and then actually just read 1 through 11, and then all right, we'll read 1 through 10, and then I'll take over.
Okay. I'm going to read from the CSB, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay. It says, Abram's wife, Sarah, had not borne any children for him, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her I can build a family. And Abram agreed. To what Sarai said. So Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as a wife for him. This happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan 10 years. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she saw that she was pregnant, her mistress became contemptible to her. Then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. May the Lord judge between me and you. Abram replied to Sarai, here, your slave is in your power. Do whatever you want with her. Then Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She replied, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. You told me to end at 10, right?
Yep. The angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael. or Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. But he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live in defiance of all his brothers. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God who sees me. And for she said, have I even seen him here and lived after he saw me? Therefore, the well was called Beer Lahai Roy. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram named his son to whom Hagar had gave birth Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. All right. I always love those big words. Anything jump out at you guys with that?
I'm not quite sure that it jumped out, but definitely, you know, kind of pay attention a little bit closely, even when, um, Hagar gets to the point to where, um, she has a hard heart towards Sarah, and even in running away, how God would, um, through an angel, say to her to go back and submit to her authority. I just imagine how challenging that would be.
Mm.
And then to have a promise from the Lord, even for her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. I think it's interesting that I guess I see this as a similar promise as Abraham got about being the father of many. But that's what kind of piqued my interest initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Anybody else? I think it's interesting when you look at this chapter that, I can't get into the head of what was happening here other than, God has told Abram that things are going to be a certain way. And you remember in chapter 15 where God was sitting there and he was saying, yeah, I want to bless you. I'm going to bless you beyond measure. And yes, you're going to have kids. And remember, we talked in the last chapter about how so much of the idea that God was telling him and how he just came around eventually to, okay, I believe you. Okay, I believe you. But how am I going to know about the land? And remember, the covenant was really about the land. The covenant was really about making sure that he would receive all of this promised land. But still, there's this issue of, how's this offspring thing going to work? And God's saying, no, I'm going to actually give you a child from you. And so it's almost like Abram and Sarai were reaching out, trying to make it work, trying to figure it out in their own strength and own understanding. And they're like, well, I guess we can do it this way because I'm getting too old. I can just imagine Sarai saying, I'm getting too old. Although it doesn't really say specifically, it just says that, let me go back here. I've got to get back over to chapter 16 in my, basically she had an Egyptian slave woman whose name was Hagar. So Sarai comes to him and says, okay, see now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. So go ahead and have relations with my slave woman. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And so she's trying to reason through, maybe that's the way this is supposed to work. And I wonder how many times we try to make things work in our own understanding instead of just continuing to trust God step by step through the process.
Right. I was gonna just add along with what you were saying. It's like she's like, oh yeah, God closed my womb. But he's like, no, actually, it wasn't time yet. You were just getting impatient and you decided to kind of take matters into your own hands. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I wonder how many times in my life maybe I've done that. You know, I can just speak for myself and just kind of understanding, you know, how many times have I thought maybe I was trying to follow what God wanted and he's told me something and maybe I get out in front of him. And because I get out in front of him, then it has some unintended consequences. It allows me to not completely have everything that he wanted for me at that point.
Joe, I think that's a great point. Because even in this, it's so amazing how you mentioned that first, because that's normally the thing that we notice in this chapter is just how Sarah, excuse me, wanted to make this thing happen. And obviously, as a woman, I don't want to blame women at all. But I just think about the parallel between this story and kind of with Adam and Eve as well, just with kind of, to me, the way this reads is like Sarah, kind of came up with this plan and then went to Abram and, told him, hey, let's do this. And Eve had done a similar thing. And so I guess as a wife, I kind of think about how sometimes if we do things out of order, or, any of us, it could happen to, but in my home particularly, if I'm trying to convince my husband to do something, so like you said, even trying to fulfill the will of God, but to be out of order, and to wait for him to bring it to pass instead of us, working it ourselves, we can kind of cause problems. And even in both of these cases, you see the interpersonal conflict between, even though, and I misspoke initially, Sarai was the one who was upset at Hagar, and this was the plan that she came up with. And so that's really notable to me.
Yeah, I think along those lines too, just from a guy's perspective, I look at, if you take the pattern between, Adam and Eve and now here, along with, any other patterns throughout. And I'm just curious if this pattern can persist, because I don't know that I've ever really studied it from this perspective, but I think it's interesting that the amount of sway that women have with their husbands, with the men, seems notable. That it's, and I know in my own marriage, when my wife, she gets set on something and that's the way it's going to be, then, even if it may be different than I originally thought, I mean, if it's reasonable, I'm like, oh, okay, let's try it. I think that's pretty notable as well. How you doing?
Right. Some of us sometimes. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I've heard somebody else say, you can be a hurt me instead of a help me. So yeah. So definitely don't want to be in that place. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think back on a time, I was thinking about this earlier. I was in a room here on Clubhouse and somebody asked me, they were talking about, I think you were in that room, Phoenicia. Somebody asked, I think it was Lindell asked me, when I kind of came to the conclusion of, how important my wife was to me and when that really arrived. And I answered the question. And then after I went on mute, I thought about it a little bit. And I remembered that what seems like the exact time that it kind of triggered for me was we were starting to get into a really challenging time. And I was trying to figure it out and trying to figure out how to save the business and save our finances. And I can remember one day I picked up the phone and I called my wife and I said, listen, things are rough. I mean, I don't know how things are going. I don't know whether I should call it today, whether I should keep pushing, whether I should, push all in, what I should do here. I mean, it was probably down to the last $50,000 or something in the business. And I don't know what to do. And her response to me was, go big or go home. Go big or go home. We got to make it happen. And I went, okay. I went big. Now we ended up losing everything. And, it ended up probably in the big picture, in hindsight, there could have been other ways to maneuver that. But for me, that was the moment when I realized we were in this together. And even though we had talked about it before, that was a key element for me. So anything else jumping out at you guys? When I look at this, I think it's really amazing that, and I think you brought this up, Phoenicia, when you look at the premise of God continuing, even though this was not his perfect will and the desire of where he wanted to go eventually, where he would go, it shows that God wanted to truly bless the lineage of Abram, and he had promised that he was going to bless that lineage of Abram, even though this particular, for lack of a better word, leg of the ancestry was not the desire. He still came and said, I got you. That he sent the angel of the Lord and found her by the spring of water in the wilderness. And basically he said, from where you've come and where are you going? Where are you running to? Where do you think you're going? And he then tells her to return. And you brought that up a second ago, Phoenicia, where you're sitting there saying that would be a tough ask. I mean, she's not been treated well, but even then, the angel of the Lord is continuing to speak to her and telling her it's going to be okay. We're going to work this thing out. Now you're going to have a son, and he's going to be a donkey of a man, but he's going to just be against everyone. He's going to constantly be in defiance of all of his brothers, but he's still going to greatly multiply descendants, because that's what the word over Abram was. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Excellent. Well, the last thing that I had here is that in verse 15, I find it interesting, or verse 16, that at this time, Abram was already 86 years old. 86 years old. He was well past his prime. So I think that's pretty interesting to think about why maybe they were in this place psychologically. They were thinking, listen, this is way past when I can see Sarai saying, I'm way past the age that I could have children. So this must be the solution. I can think about times where I've lost things or where I've been promised something. And when you start digging in and thinking about all the solutions, I'm a strategist by nature. And sometimes you start looking at all the options and they don't always match up with your best option. But sometimes you start seeing all kinds of options that probably are just not the things to think about. For me, when I got down in the dumps and I'm trying to figure out how to provide for my family, and I start looking at my insurance policy, that's a bad day. That's a bad logic. And I can just imagine when you start looking at Sarai, you start looking at the mindset where she was at, she was not necessarily processing the right logic. She was processing what she could see in front of her. And also, I think it's fair to note that Sarai wasn't part of that conversation between Abram and the Lord. She wasn't part of that vision. And so she's hearing that secondhand. And I got to believe that plays something into it as well.
No, Joe, I absolutely agree. Don't have a lot of extra to say on that, but I absolutely agree.
Very good. Well, this looks like it's going to be a short room today, which is okay with me. We're just going to go ahead and wrap it up here and get ready for Genesis chapter 17. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Very good. Well, you guys are incredible. Thanks for coming. And I'm going to go ahead and shut down the broadcast. Once again, if you are watching us here on Facebook or YouTube, we are here every day at 3 o'clock Mountain Time, going through the Bible chapter by chapter. And tomorrow we will be in Genesis chapter 17. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.